Welcome to Unlocking Bach, audio program notes for upcoming concerts in Music Worcester's The Complete Bach. I'm Artistic Director Dr. Chris Shepard. Join me as we climb into the miraculous mind of Johann Sebastian Bach. Hello again, this is Chris Shepard with you today to talk about our first annual Bach Birthday Bash weekend, the final concert, which we are calling the Cantathon. Just as it sounds, it is a concert full of Bach's cantatas, in this case, his church cantatas, his sacred cantatas, and it is a thon because we have 5 different choirs, 5 different conductors, 5 different cantatas on that afternoon. We're so excited about this, about kicking off this new tradition. And in the middle of the concert, 3 cantatas, and then we will have a champagne and cake toast to Johann Sebastian Bach, slightly extended intermission to do that, and then come back for the final 2, which will finish this first annual Bach Birthday Bash weekend. Today, I wanted to talk to you about 2 of those cantatas, and specifically the opening choruses from those 2, so that you can get an idea of the different types of cantatas that you are going to come across in these 11 years. I should also say it is a really exciting concert because it is the first time that we're really pulling together the Worcester Bach Collective. As I said, it's 5 different choruses. They are all from the Worcester area. We have the Trinity Lutheran Church Choir conducted by Mark Mummert, the All Saints Episcopal Church Choir conducted by Kevin Neal, the WPI choirs conducted by Joshua Rohde, the Master Singers of Worcester conducted by Ed Tyler, and a chamber choir from the Worcester Chorus conducted by yours truly, bringing up the rear and finishing the concert with BWV 40. In fact, that's where I want to start today. This cantata is called Dazu ist erschienen der Sohn Gottes, which means, for this reason has the Son of God appeared. Now, I'm going to be able to use in this particular episode actual recordings of these choruses because they are recordings that I personally made in Sydney with the Sydney and Bach Choir. As I have said many times, we have to be careful not to use existing recordings because the YouTube algorithm picks them up and then won't let us post our podcast episodes. So we're lucky for these 2 because I have something that I can play for you so that you can hear the actual clips. This opening chorus is a great example of what is sometimes referred to in Bach's music as concerted. So the word concert, concerted music. In Italian, we might call it concertato music. And all that means is that it is a larger scale construction, larger scale architecture. And this movement is particularly larger scale. And it sounds something like a Brandenburg concerto, for example. It's the same word that we have for concerto. And as you will hear in the Bach 101 episode about the concerto, that really refers to a style of music even more so than a genre. And as often happens, you get an extended opening ritornello, an orchestral introduction. Let me just play a little bit on the piano just to get your ears ready for this. Now, I'm not going to pick this apart in quite the same way that I have often gone into the weeds, but I will mention, because we always like to talk about those 3 E's, the economy of how he composes. That in the opening you get this. So that's already a repetition, isn't it? Beginning bum, beep, bum, 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 bum. Same thing, bum, 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 but then he creates a sequence by taking a fragment, moving it up, and then what happens here? That's the exact same as the beginning, which was this, is now in a new key. It's exact repetition, but transposed. Now, why am I saying all these things, even though I'm saying that I'm not going to say all these things in this episode? Only because I want to orient your ears to realize that this is just like any of Bach's music, that he takes an opening motto and then exploits everything that is possible in that. This orchestra is strings plus 2 oboes plus 2 horns. Now, that is a little bit out of the ordinary. We are used to seeing trumpets, but there are not that many cantatas that feature a pair of horns. What does the horn represent in Baroque music? The horn is associated with hunting. It is associated with the call. So this opening fanfare, because it's just continuo, plays a chord, and then the horns play. And that even sounds like a hunting call, doesn't it? So what is it calling? It's calling out that text. For this reason has the Son of God appeared. So it is announcing the arrival of the Son of God. Let me play for you from that recording I made with the Sydneyan Bach Choir and Orchestra, the opening ritornello, that whole opening section, and be listening for the ways that he uses that opening motto. But of course, we know now with Bach that you're also just going to get extended sequences that are like episodes in fugues, in as much as they really just further the music without being necessarily related to the opening. Sort of like episodes in fugues, where you get a little bit of the idea, but then there's sequences just to further the music and let it go in new directions. The bass part of this section that I'm thinking of, for example, does this. And you remember the beginning? Well, it's just taking that idea and playing with it a little bit. And together, this is what happens. So listen for those sequences that helps that whole introduction, that ritornello, travel a bit musically. We're going to start from the very beginning, so you hear that whole orchestral introduction, and then the choir comes in. I'll let you hear a bit of that. They sing, Dazu ist erschienen. Dazu ist erschienen der Sohn Gottes. For thus has the Son of God appeared. And even after the choir appears, you are going to hear bits and pieces of that opening ritornello. So I'm going to go a little bit into this section so you can get a sense of it. Here we go, the beginning of cantata number 40. So you have heard the opening of this, and you think you can be forgiven for thinking that you have a good sense of everything that is in this piece. But something changes. The first part of the text, for this reason has the Son of God appeared. So all that we have so far is that announcement, that annunciation that the Son of God appeared. But we've got to finish the sentence, because it begins, for this reason has the Son of God appeared, and here's the second half, that he may destroy all the works of the devil. So the appearance of God is a glorious thing, but the conquering of the devil is a little bit different. And this is what the choir does. And the text is such a tongue twister. Dass die Werke des Teufels zerstöre. Dass die Werke des Teufels zerstöre. And that is every bit as hard to sing as it sounds that it would be. Dass die Werke des Teufels zerstöre. Dass die Werke des Teufels zerstöre. And it goes around the choir. That idea gets passed around with repetition and transposition, just like everything in Bach's economical writing. So all of a sudden, things go in a very different direction. Let's just listen to that part, and you will hear it is so marcato, really marked, dass die Werke des Teufels zerstöre. So that you've had that opening, the glory, the announcement, the annunciation of the appearance of Son of God, and then you get the reason that he has appeared. And he is the conqueror who is going to trample Satan underfoot. Listen to that section now. So now you could be forgiven for thinking that that is everything in this movement, and it is not. This really is as large scale an opening movement as you will find in a sacred cantata by Bach. And there are a number that do exactly what I'm about to show you, that open with an extended ritornello in the orchestra, and then the choir comes in amplifying and using that material. In this BWV 40, it even adds that other sense, the sense of Satan being trampled. And then everything comes crashing to a halt, and this happens. I'm going to ask you, what style of music, what genre of music is this? And I bet after all of these episodes of Bach 101 and Unlocking Bach, you know that's a fugue. How amazing is that? Just when you think that you have been exposed to all the material that is going to be in this movement, he goes somewhere entirely different. Dazu ist erschienen der Sohn Gottes. It's the exact same text as the beginning. Dazu ist erschienen. In the beginning, it had that announcement. Dazu ist erschienen. And the choir sang together in 4 parts. Dazu ist erschienen. But then it clears, and you have just the tenors alone. Dazu ist erschienen der Sohn Gott. Then bass. Dazu ist erschienen der Sohn Gott. Well, you know how fugues work, so I'm not going to describe that entirely. What I love about this is that you had the first bit, which was Dazu ist erschienen, quite rhythmic, that horn call. And here, it is so beautiful and lyrical. I think of it as the promise that has been given. For this reason has the Son of God appeared. Very comforting. Let's listen just through the first exposition of that fugue with the voices. You're going to hear tenor, and then bass, then soprano, and then alto. And then let's come back and find where he goes from there. So this is the opening exposition of the fugue at the center of BWV 40. Say it again. You could be forgiven for thinking that now you know how this piece goes. That is a straightforward fugue. It's very beautiful and lyrical. However, what was the second half of that sentence? For this reason has the Son of God appeared, that he will trample the works of the devil. Dass die Werke, the works, des Teufels, of the devils, zerstöre, destroy. So we're going along happily secure in the safety of our salvation, but Satan is always trying to steal it. And this is what happens. The tenors sing, dass die Werke des Teufels zerstöre. We get from that earlier section, dass die Werke des Teufels zerstöre. And they go on. Let me play this. You don't want to hear me sing it. So difficult. It is really hard to sing that. And I know that there are choral singers out there that think that long melismas on fast-moving 16th notes are the work of the devil, so they might get that little pun. All the way through this section now is this dichotomy between the salvation. Dazu ist erschienen der Sohn Gott. Like, for example, right there, the altos sing that, and then the tenors. So both exist at the same time, and I think it's pretty clear that third E, enigmatic, what is the puzzle, what is the riddle? I think that this riddle is pretty clear. It is the Monday New York Times crossword puzzle. You don't have to know a great deal to get the theology of this, which is that you can never be complacent in your salvation. You have to watch out for the wiles of Satan. So through this section now, you will hear das die Werke des Teufels. You hear Satan try to steal it away. But then with greater and greater force, the choir sings section by section the fugue subject, dazu ist erschienen, dazu, and there's this section where they pile on one another and they go higher and higher. I said to my alto section when I was rehearsing this, there's an alto entry that starts on a high D, dazu ist erschienen, which is quite high for altos. As I said to them, Bach knew for sure that that was going to sound perhaps a little raucous in that register, but what he's trying to do is say that you have to drown out the call of Satan. You have to drown out the temptation that is going to come your way, and by the end of the section, salvation wins, and what happens? Dazu ist erschienen. Dazu ist erschienen. That's just exactly from the beginning. So we go back to the beginning in a new key. It's slightly higher so that you get a greater sense of the triumph in all of this. So let me just review very quickly. How is this section put together? That you have the fugue entering, completely oblivious of Satan lurking in the background. And then he starts to come in and hammers at you. And each of the sections gets to be both the appearance of the Son of God and the appearance of Satan. So now let's listen to that entire central fugue. And I'm just going to go far enough after it so that you hear that it really is the beginning all over again. Yes, a higher key, that doesn't really matter. That Bach is finishing the form in a different way. Here it is. Let's listen to that fugue from BWV 40. So now we know the entire structure of this piece. It is monumental. It is A, B, A, by which I mean this. The A section is that whole idea of the call played by the horn and how the choir sings the text, dazu ist erschienen, together in block chords. The A returns at the end, and I just let you hear that. I let you hear that that comes back in, and I can assure you it's essentially the same as the beginning. So two pillars on the outside framing this internal section, which is quite a surprise when it hits. That fugue. And it is very out of the ordinary with a fugue not to introduce what is essentially the counter subject. The devil in this case is the counter subject. It's very rare not to introduce the counter subject in the first exposition. And it's because, theologically, Bach wants us to get the sense of Satan lurking in the background till he can catch us unawares when we are at our most complacent. So it is a monumental fugue set within a monumental movement. I love this. We are not supposed to have favorite Bach pieces. It's like children. But I have to say that that cantata is one of my very favorites. And it closes our program on Sunday. In the first half of the program, there is another wonderful cantata. This is cantata 133, and the title is Ich freue mich in dir. Ich freue mich in dir. And the text just means I rejoice in thee and bid thee welcome. This is a cantata that was written for the Christmas season in 1724. This is from the second annual cycle. You might remember the word Jahrgang that I introduced to you when we talked about the cantatas. And in that second cycle, that first E, encyclopedic, Bach very self-consciously wanted to create an entire cycle of cantatas that used as their basis Lutheran chorales, Lutheran hymns. This is the hymn that he based this cantata on. As chorales go, it is a really pretty one and very diatonic, very much just D major there, and sort of appropriate, I think, for this Christmas. It is the second day after Christmas that this cantata was written for, and it's just a lovely, lovely chorale melody. And so we wonder, how is he going to use it in the cantata itself, cantata 133? Very early in the Bach 101 episodes, I introduced you, or probably reintroduced you, to Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring. And the point of Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring is that he uses a chorale, Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring. He uses a hymn, but creates music around it. That is something that is called a chorale fantasia, sometimes called a chorale prelude. If you were going to play a piece like that on the organ, it would be called a chorale prelude. That is what Bach does here as well for cantata 133. You have material that is not even necessarily closely related to the hymn itself, but is wonderful material. And then the chorale breaks in like this. And it does it phrase by phrase, that if you knew the chorale, you would be able to follow it very closely. It's harder for us because we haven't really encountered so many of these Lutheran hymns. He always finishes, or almost always, finishes the cantata with the full chorale like a hymn done all the way through. But in this, the chorale fantasia, he has the instrumental music, and then that is interrupted by phrase after phrase. Second phrase. And it's really a beautiful, very attractive way of dealing with a chorale melody. And in this one, it's very straightforward. It's just like Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring, that the choir always sings together in 4 parts. There are other ones. I talked about BWV1 in one of those podcast episodes. And in that, the chorale melody is sung in long notes by the soprano throughout, which we call a cantus firmus, while the other 3 parts below the soprano imitate the soprano. That is a more complex chorale fantasia. This is about as straightforward as it gets. And what is that opening material? Well, it's just very sunny, as you might expect for a Christmas piece. It is the violins and the oboes. And even here, the oboes don't play separate from the violins. So it's a very economical orchestration. So I just want to show enough so I can make the point, and then let's listen to it in the orchestra, which is so much nicer than just the piano alone. The opening motto. Remember, we always talk about the motto, that little word, the germ of the idea. And then what's next? Repetition, but then goes higher. And then this. Well, that certainly is a sequence. So beginning, higher, sequence. Starts as a sequence, but then it keeps going. So it takes the motto itself and then keeps moving it up. Just sequences over and over and over again. So he uses the germ of the idea throughout, but then of course explores so much of what he can do. Well, and even that germ of the idea, I said to you that the instrumental material is not necessarily related to the chorale tune itself, but the chorale melody, the opening, this ba ba ba, be da 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 da, that does actually use the same kernel of the idea. You might or might not even catch that when you're listening to it, just as a listener in the service in Leipzig, but certainly Bach had it in mind. From this, Wohlan so will ich mich, and then even then it went higher. So the sequence is leading up. So there is a little bit of a connection, but we don't have to work too hard to make that. I think the best thing that you could do would be for me to play the whole movement, which is sung here by the Sydneyan Bach Choir, which I conducted in Sydney, Sydneyan Bach Choir and Orchestra. But before I play the whole thing, I want to play one phrase, because I want to make the point that even though it's pretty straightforward, orchestra, choir, orchestra, choir, orchestra, choir, and the orchestra material all the way through is derived from that opening material, whereas the choral material all the way through is simply the chorale. He can't always leave well enough alone, and we love that about Bach, that he doesn't just keep it as a straight 4-part cut and paste of the hymn. He does sometimes, but then sometimes he will get amazing words. For example, the word here is, what a sweet sound. Ach, wie ein süßer Ton. What a sweet sound. So instead of just being this, keeping very straight 4 parts, he actually has the sopranos hold the word ton for sound, and then the parts underneath keep playing around. Ach wie ein süßer Ton, ein süßer Ton. So it's not that straightforward. How about listening just to that little phrase? Sopranos holding the word ton while the lower parts repeat the words. Otherwise, we don't get word repetition. So let's listen to that phrase. And then there is one more phrase where he really goes to town. And again, instead of just playing the final phrase straightforward, he does have the sopranos do it slightly ornamented. But listen to what the other parts do underneath it. I won't even play it on the piano first, I'll let you hear it. It's this explosion of joy. The text here is the great Son of God, der große Gottes Sohn, the great Son of God, and you get the sense of that glory. And then it goes from that glorious music back into the end of the orchestral section. So now let's listen to that final phrase. Now, let's listen to the whole movement. And I would make the point, we talked about that superstructure of BWV 40, that ABA structure. Well, that's not true here because you are always limited by the chorale, by the shape of the hymn itself, how many phrases it has, the way that Bach is going to break that down. And in these chorale preludes, or chorale fantasias, if you will, the structure that you're much more aware of is the alternation orchestra, choir, orchestra, choir, orchestra, choir. I would suggest to you, as you listen to this, and maybe go back and listen a second time, spend a little bit more time listening to the orchestra, and what you will hear is almost all of their material is directly derived, related to that opening ritornello. That gets masked once the choir is involved, but remember, the economy of Bach's writing, the economy of Bach's writing. So here it is, that whole opening from BWV 133, Ich freue dich in mir. So there you have it. You're unlocking Bach for the final concert of the first annual Bach Birthday Weekend. I do hope you can come. It is such a privilege to be able to hear 5 cantatas in one afternoon and begin to get a sense of and an appreciation for just how extraordinarily varied his compositional voice can be across all these pieces. But still, it's the same Bach. Perhaps the best thing you could think about throughout this afternoon is focus on the beginning of each piece, whether it's an aria or a chorus, to that opening orchestral ritornello, and listen in particular to that opening motto, that very first idea. Or just listen to the opening idea of each new movement and try to follow that motto, because it will appear in so many different forms through that movement. You're going to hear fugues, you're going to hear duets, you're going to hear arias, you're going to hear recitatives. You will get the full gamut of the sacred cantata repertoire for this cantatathon. I am so excited about it, and I really look forward to seeing you there and to talking with you again when we will continue to explore this capacious brain of Johann Sebastian Bach in our next episode of Unlocking Bach. Thank you so much.